Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Learning BorderConnect API for Developers. Excuse me. Today's webinar will be hosted by Daniel Dent. Daniel is BorderConnect's Chief Executive Officer and Chief Software Developer. And he'll be sharing specific topics in this webinar, such as what is BorderConnect's eManifest API, how do you connect, what formats we use to accept for our data exchange, and we'll be answering some questions, some standard questions as well. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, we're going to go ahead and if you guys can use a chat box feature and just type in your questions and we will answer it at the end of each module and go through specific scenarios that you'd like covered. So without further ado, here is Daniel Dent.
Hi, everyone. All right, let's get started. First, I'd like to answer what is BorderConnect's eManifest API. So BorderConnect's eManifest API is essentially an easy way for you to send and receive eManifest related data. We've built the API mainly at the request of dispatch softwares and other third-party providers who wish to avoid the complexities involved in connecting directly to U.S. Customs or Canada Customs. What BorderConnect's API is intended to do is abstract away a lot of the complex business logic and redundancies that are present in customs message maps. The next question, so how do you connect to BorderConnect's API? So BorderConnect chose to use WebSockets as our connectivity method. We evaluated many different technologies. Essentially, if you're not familiar with WebSockets, what it does is open a persistent two-way connection between our server and the client. And in this case, the client is typically servers used by your dispatch software or by the third-party provider. The advantage of WebSockets is that it's immediate persistent connection. So if you, for example, have a truck that's waiting to arrive at the border, you've completed an eManifest and sent it, you want real-time notification or as close to real-time as possible of when that shipment has arrived. But one of the problems with a REST API or similar connectivity methods are that you're stuck sending basically queue response, where you're asking, do I have any data queued on a certain cycle? With WebSockets, as soon as we receive data from U.S. or Canada Customs, we translate that into an easy-to-understand data message that your software can easily parse and read, and we send it immediately. The big advantage of that is that there's no waiting, there's no continual waste of bandwidth sending over and over and over again. So it's very powerful, it's very flexible. Its performance is essentially as quick as you can possibly do because it's essentially a one raw full duplex socket. So what format do we use to exchange the data? We use JSON. So JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JSON is definitely an easy and universal format. One of the beautiful things about JSON is that it's almost human readable, or it is human readable in many instances. So if you're familiar with other connectivity methods, for example, let's compare against comma separated value. So a CSV file. If you've ever used a CSV file to try to encode large, complex sets of data, you will have realized pretty quickly that it's not very good at containing those object structures. One of the first things that you'll find when you start sending and receiving with CSV is that you can't encode, for example, lists of sub-objects. you have to keep appending to the end of the CSV file, or you have to get into sending multiple CSV files just for the simple formatted data. Another format you might be used to or have used in the past would be XML. XML is a lot better. It's a lot closer to what JSON is. Its main disadvantage is that there's multiple ways to represent the data, and there's a lot of easy ways to misinterpret based on the design. So some XML files could be designed to use everything as parameters within the tag. Others can have multiple nested tags. The names of the tags are very strict in XML. Of course, you can't have spaces and a lot of other common things similar to JSON. But because of the flexibility of XML and the way tags work, having angle brackets to encode the tags, it ends up being hard to read from a human perspective, especially the more complicated the data. JSON doesn't suffer that problem. If you look at a typical JSON message, it starts with a little curly bracket. We say the data type in all of our messages, and then there's essentially some predefined fields that are easy to understand. So in this example, for example, message is saying one trip accepted or successfully imported. It's giving a date time, and it's giving a trip count as an integer, and it's giving a trip number as a string. So if you're familiar with coding at all, you'll recognize, common data types here: integers, strings, and then you can have nested objects. So I can have a list. So you can see an array of objects, which again, if you're comparing this to XML, there would be a lot more. There'd be a lot more syntax, just closing and opening tags, and the simplicity of JSON is there is no unnecessary markup. Essentially, you can see it's about as concise as can be, using the square bracket here to denote the array. If I had multiple errors, I would just simply have a comma and then the next JSON object. Let's move on to the next question. If anyone has any, if anyone's not familiar with JSON, if you do a quick Google query, there's a ton of easy to understand tutorials and references to get you up to date. So what I'd like to do is do an example of the send and receive sequence for ACI messages. So I'm just going to pop into an IDE that has some JSON messages formatted here. So we're going to start with ACI. So I'm going to just scroll through this file and kind of explain what the message is doing and what's happened here. So this is an inbound message. So this is a message that you would send to BorderConnect servers from your dispatch software. You can see the type is ACI trip. So I'm expecting ACI trip information to be present in the data element. You can see the start of this and the end of this. So the majority of the file is just the ACI trip data and shipment data. In this instance, you can see I'm adding a truck. And again, very human readable. I'm saying where the port of entry is, giving the port code. I'm saying I'm giving a list of trailers. So again, if you're familiar with JSON, here's a simple array. You'd have a list of sub-objects, which are the ACI trailers. I'm going to list my drivers and passengers. So I'm going to keep continuing down. So here's a list of passengers. And then we have a list of shipments. So the shipments, you can send the shipments as its own data type to our API or upload them directly to BorderConnect. So essentially, this section here, which lists arrays of data of shipments. In this case, I have two PARs on board. So you can see the first PAR's number has a car control number ending in 9797, and the next PAR's also ends in the 9797. We have port of entry, release office, city of loading, all the data you'd expect on a typical ACI eManifest. We have our shipper, New York Islanders, our consignee, Calgary Flames, the commodity, the estimated arrival date, the operation. So what we're trying to get is essentially a create of the trip inside BorderConnect's database. After you send this data to us, we'll respond to you. So you can see this was sent at 10:34:41, and BorderConnect comes back at 10:34:59. So essentially it took our server less than 20 seconds to read in your data and make a note to you that it was successfully imported. There was no errors that we could detected. So it's giving you the trip count, the shipment count, and the trip number. So it's just enough information for you to notify the user that their send was successful getting into the system. BorderConnect will next, and you can see again the time being almost instantaneous, same timestamp. Another ACC response saying that we forwarded this message to Canada Customs. So it's moving this status of the manifest to transmitted. So it's saying one ACI send request successfully transmitted. And then you can also see the responses from Customs. So this was 10:34 at 10:38. So about 4 minutes later, Canada Customs responds that the manifest didn't meet the minimum time. So again, this is just a notice from Canada Customs. It's not a reject of the manifest, but it can provide your client information that, hey, maybe I would like to amend my ETA. You can see the next message saying that the actual trip and the shipments are accepted, and the date and time and CBSA's timestamp. So you know, based on the CBSA timestamp, when your 1 hour notice can start, potentially. In this case, we're also waiting for the notice of the broker's entry numbers. This carrier, I don't believe, was set up for RNS. If they were, they would have received a couple additional notifications letting them know the transaction number from the broker. And again, all these message formats are available on our website if you go into the JSON manuals. For example, the RNS that I was just speaking of, I believe, is at the end of the manual. And you can see what the RNS message would have looked like. It's just simply saying what the car control number would have been, what the transaction number would have been, and then providing some basic status about the release notification. And then you can see this manifest actually arriving at Customs. So in this case, it looks like it arrived, well, much too early. It essentially arrived less than 10 minutes after the manifest was accepted and on file. And you can see the notification referencing the 2 shipments and the trip number. So just enough information that you should be able to update your system programmatically and notify the end user. Okay, now we'll go into an ACE manifest. So again, we're trying to simplify and unify both the way Canada and U.S. Customs work. So with ACE trip data, you can see the data type's changed. It's no longer ACI trip, it's ACE trip. You're still providing much of the basic information, company key, trip number, the port of arrival, truck information, truck passenger information. In fact, that's a mirror copy. So we've unified as much as we can between the ACI and ACE. So when you proceed with the development of our API, there's going to be a lot of things. If you code ACI first, there's going to be a lot of things you can use from that initial development to code the ACE section or vice versa. You can see the shipment type is going to be PAPS. It could be any U.S. valid U.S. shipment type, so it could be a Section 321 or various customer shipment control numbers appearing, province of loading, so in this case Ontario. The shippers, Toronto Maple Leafs Corp, giving the address. The consignees, New Jersey Devils Inc., giving the address and the quantities, giving you, again, quantity details, the quantity, the unit type, the weight. And then second, PAPS number. And again, same thing, it's giving you the name of the shipper, the name of consignee, the name of commodity, the units and the weight. So this message would have been sent to us at 10:55:32, and you can see our server responding back at 10:55:58. So it took our server about 6 seconds to parse in that ACI manifest with the 2 shipments. And we immediately send back a response, again 1 second later, saying that it's been forwarded to Canada Customs. And then you can see Canada Customs response, in this case, about a minute or 30 seconds later, sorry, U.S. Customs response. And U.S. Customs is saying the complete manifest and shipments are on file. It's giving the number of shipments accepted. And then ACE is telling us some additional information. So ACE is giving us the entry number. It's giving us prior notice. So it's giving us all the notifications you'd get traditionally through the eManifest portal. If you're familiar with using BorderConnect's eManifest portal, these all appear as status items as you scroll through the manifest. You can see another response saying complete trip and shipment. Ben, this is entry on file notice and entry on file notice, giving you the entry number. So the first notice was the FDA notice on file. Second notice is the entry numbers. And then you can see the arrival of the truck at the first U.S. port. So again, the actual arrival of the truck very soon after. And then you can see the truck being released at the border. So again, these are all the raw EDI release codes that we're getting and translating into JSON for you. And then you can see our ACE response notifying you that the goods entered and released general examination. And the you can see essentially the full progress from a manifest, you sending us the data, it getting accepted, it getting entry numbers, and it arriving and releasing at the border. Very similar flow as you're seeing in the ACE message types. So next, what I'd like to do is introduce 2 new EDI messages that are new to our API. Complete, not filled out, but you can see the data type for it is move shipment request. We have a send ID. We have a company key, the same as you would for any other message. We have the list of shipments that you'd like to attach. So essentially, the goal of this message is to move shipments. So if you have unassociated shipments or shipments on other manifests you'd like from one manifest to another, this essentially provides you an easy way to attach those new shipments. This is especially useful if your truck arrives at the border with an invalid number. So for example, Customs now have locked your manifest because it's in the arrival state, so you can no longer just cancel and resend to fix your data. You have to actually detach the old shipment, attach the new one. Again, this is all getting into the weeds and a little bit more complicated than we'd like to go into for the webinar. But when we do release this, I encourage you to to read the completed version of this manual. Ask us if you have any questions. Go through a business analysis of it. Make sure that it's something you need. One of the goals of BorderConnect API is to be as flexible as possible. So we would consider these new message types fairly advanced for advanced API users. Some users won't need this functionality, but I just want to make you aware that it is something new that is available. So the next type of message, I'll just finish scrolling through this quickly. You can see that this message can also be used to detach shipments. So it's add shipments, detach shipments from existing manifest. The other message type is to requeue previous messages. So this is mainly used in the case of lost messages. So for example, if you had a database error during a particular time period, or you have a particular shipment or trip that you don't think you received all of the EDI or JSON messages you should have, you can basically do a requeue request, and we will we'll give you those previous messages again. So you can say a from date, and you can say a to date, or you can specify a trip number, and it'll give you all the messages related to that trip number. Or you could do a like query, so you can essentially say, does the message contain? And we'll parse the JSON looking for any messages that contain that value and requeue all of them that match. There is a send limit of 100 messages per one of these requests, so you're going to want to be relatively precise, or if you're sending in a time field, you're not going to want to requeue an entire day's worth of messages. It's really meant for and intended for like small window communication issues. Doesn't look like we have any other questions. What I encourage everybody to do is to read through the BorderConnect manual. We've tried to make it, it is intended for programmers, but we've tried to make it as easy to read and easy to understand as possible. If you notice anything that's wrong or you want elaborated more, feel free to call us. Suggest updates to the manual. We'd be very happy to improve it, make the next developers that are providing connectivity make their job a little bit easier if you do run into any issues. We're always available to help. I'm going to pass the mic back to Justin. And again, if you do have any other questions or you need anything, feel free to email me directly, email admin@borderconnect.com, or just give our sales department a call at 1-800-596-5176.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Hopefully that answered everyone's questions. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude the webinar. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And stay tuned to our events page on BorderConnect. If you have problems finding it, it's on the top menu option under events. And you can go ahead and take a look at what events and future webinars we do have planned, and you can register directly from there. You can also subscribe to BorderConnect's YouTube channel, where you can access the full libraries of webinars that BorderConnect has ever had, as well as many tutorial videos covering most scenarios that you may encounter while using BorderConnect. To sign up for a free 30-day ACE or ACI software trial, you can visit our website and click the Sign Up Now button at the top, and then follow up by giving one of our sales representatives a call. As always, if you have any further questions, as Daniel mentioned, you can reach us toll-free at 1-800-596-5176, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you do have. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, and I look forward to sharing more information with you in the future.